Okay, so let me start the presentation. Okay, so the agenda of today. So I'm sorry, we were supposed to be two to present this presentation. Myself, Charles Gismar, product manager for SMC, and also Manuel Jordan, product marketing manager. I don't know if he will manage to join us later during this presentation. So the agenda of today's webinar, of course, we are talking about the launch of the release of SMC 3.0. We will talk about the three main features we are launching. The first one is the network management, then the local modification management, and finally, the security policy management. Okay, it seems to be the wrong screen. Let me change it. Okay, this should be the good one. Okay, sorry. So basically, just to introduce this new version of SMC. So SMC 3.0 is a new version that improves SNS network configuration management and also enhances the impact control related to local modifications. Also, thanks to this version, we optimize the organization of security rules which are common to several sites. So now, if we go first to the first feature, which is the network management. Without SMC, network configuration is quite a challenge. Basically, this is a waste of time, because you have to connect each time to every single firewall in order to follow and to manage the network configuration. Also, it is not possible to configure the firewalls which are not connected when you are not able to connect to the firewall. And also, of course, it is a risk of error when working on the rules, because when working on the rule, you can give details about the interfaces which are not handled so far without SMC. Also, you always risk some disconnection when working on the configuration. For some of the users, the infrastructure can be very complex with many zones, many rules, and when playing between the firewalls and the network firewall, you can experience some problem of the connection, which could be broken when performing some modification. So we introduce the network management on SMC 3.0. So basically, SMC becomes the central point to manage all the SNS network interfaces. So when going into the settings of a firewall, now you get one new tab which is called interfaces, and allow you to manage the firewall network interfaces. So no need to connect to each firewall, to each SNS independently. Only one connection to the SMC as a centralized management system solution, and you get the network configuration for every firewall, even for those who are not connected to SMC at this time. But we go quite deeper with the integration of network management for SNS, because we integrate also the network into the different feature. For this example here, you can see that the interfaces are specified for source and destination of a rule, and the IP address are automatically retrieved by SMC. We can see here on this slide that we also have network management into the consistency check that has been introduced with the previous version. So now SMC can help you to set consistent network configuration. So some details about network management. The first one is that we cover with the SMC 3.0 the most common used network interfaces. So when saying that, I would say Ethernet interfaces, bridges, VLAN, aggregates, and all these interfaces in IPv4. Something interesting to know is that all SNS starting from version 3.7 supports network management with read-only mode, and write mode will be available in the future with the next SNS version, which should be the 4.2.4. At this time, you will be able also to manage in write mode all the interfaces, the related interfaces. So the consistency check ensure the configuration is consistent, and the configuration is possible even if the SNS is not connected. Now let me try to share with you one quick video demonstration in order to show you how this network management works with SMC 3.0. I hope this will work.
On the firewall setting panel, I can find a new tab which displays the network configuration. By default, this tab is in read-only mode, and SMC automatically retrieves and displays the information related to the firewall existing interfaces. The first interest is that it is no longer necessary to connect to each firewall to get the network information. But the integration level is higher than that. SMC uses the network information for other features. For example, here, with the filtering rule, SMC resolves the object and provides the IP address. And SMC is also able to detect inconsistencies and raises alerts through the consistency check. In this example, the rule uses an interface which does not exist, and thanks to this warning, I can easily correct the rule. With SMC 3.0, you also have the possibility to modify the firewall network configuration from SMC. By activating the related option, the tab is no longer in a read-only mode, and I can do a modification, like here with this interface I am disabling. The network modifications are pushed to the firewall when deploying the configuration. So I can work on the configuration and apply it later, or I can also work on the configuration even if the firewall is not connected to SMC. In the configuration I have just deployed, I have voluntarily deactivated the interface which is used by the firewall to connect to SMC. It is embarrassing because I now have to connect on the firewall to correct my mistake, and sometimes I am not close to the firewall. Fortunately, it won't be necessary because the firewall has automatically detected that its connection with SMC was broken, and it has restored the previous configuration. The production is back quickly, and I don't have to send someone correct my mistake on site. With SMC 3.0, I can manage my firewall network interfaces from SMC with a security mechanism which ensure the connection between SMC and the SNS won't be broken.
Okay, hi again. So I hope the demonstration went well, and you were able to see the video and to hear the sound. So one information also I did not mention is that with this network management, we introduce a rollback feature that ensure to always have the connection on between SNS and SMC in order to be sure that you won't be cut from your network. So yes, this automatic rollback. So it is in order to, if the connection breaks for a good reason, there is an option in order to disable the rollback on the SNS. The timeout can be customized, and this feature will be supported from SNS version 4.2.4. Now let's go to the second feature, which is the local modification management. So local modification can happen for a good or for a bad reason in your network. For example, for a good reason, you could have some operational issue on your network, and when that happens, you need local teams to provide some quick modifications on the network. Or for a bad reason, some hacker would want to breach the network. So basically, when that happens, in any case, the administrator has to be warned that something had happened locally on the firewall. So this is something we introduced with SMC 3.0, is the identification automatically of local modification. And when that happens, the administrator is warned. He has a critical alarm alert on SMC. He has a quick option to display the difference between the SMC configuration and the SNS configuration in order to understand what has been modified locally on the SNS. And he has also the possibility to restore the SMC configuration if he considers the SMC configuration is the one that should apply on the SNS. So some details about local modifications. Local modifications that are identified automatically are all the features that are managed by SMC. So basically, the network, the policy rules, the objects, the VPN, the certificates. So when some administrator or some hacker touch either of this item locally on the SNS, they are automatically raised on SMC. This feature works with any SNS starting from version 3.7, and the indicator that is raised as critical. So here again, I propose you to see a demonstration of this feature.
Let's imagine that a user has modified locally on a firewall an item which is normally deployed from SMC. This could happen for a good reason, in order to quickly solve a production problem, for example, or if some hacker would want to breach the security policy that we have previously defined. For example, the modification from block all to pass all of this rule may have really important consequences. On SMC side, a warning is immediately raised. The administrator can display the difference between SMC and SNS configurations in order to understand the modification that has been performed, and he can also restore SMC configuration if necessary. So thanks to this feature, I am warned as soon as a local modification on the setting managed by the SMC is done, and I can quickly react. Potential impacts on my activity are lowered, and I can keep the security to the level I have centrally defined.
Okay, of course, if you have any question, do not hesitate to raise the questions with the GoToWebinar question tool, and I will get back to all the questions at the end of this presentation. So now the last feature we wanted to talk about today is the security policy management. You know that with SMC, you already have some factorization options thanks to the folders hierarchy. So basically, when you define a rule on the folder, it will apply to all the firewalls that are included into this folder. However, this method doesn't work if the SNS are in different folders. Also, if a service is managed by several rules and you want to apply it to different firewall, all the rules have to be duplicated for every firewall, and then that can be quite a challenge for the administrator. With SMC 3.0, we introduce the rule sets that is a new mechanism in order to have centrally managed solution of the rules in order to improve the user experience. So in parallel of the factorization with the folder hierarchy, now you have the rule sets, some rule set that you can create. You can define as much rules as you want into these rule sets, and then apply the rule sets to the firewall. Something really interesting is that you can apply it to every firewall, whatever the folder hierarchy is. Once applied to the firewall, the rule set is included into the firewall policy. You can easily recognize a rule set thanks to the frame of the rule set in order to have a better identification. And of course, you can position the rule set on the firewall level at the place you want. Some details about this feature. So there are several ways to implement rule sets. You can assign directly the firewall from the rule set page or directly from the firewall policy page. Of course, once when you provide a modification on the rule set, it is automatically pushed on every firewall which is using these rule sets. You don't have to modify it on each firewall. It is a mechanism that is complementary with the folder mechanism. A folder mechanism allows you to do factorization for firewall that are included into the same folders, and the rule sets will be complementary and oriented with services. And it works with all SNS starting from version 3.7. Once again, let me give you one demonstration.
In SMC, you are already able to define some security rules which will be applied to several firewalls thanks to the folder mechanism. We can see in this folder, for example, that the 4 rules will be used by all the firewalls included in this folder. However, sometimes I want to apply some rules to several firewalls which are not in the same folder hierarchy. For example, I have 100 of sites which are organized in SMC by type, like factory, offices or shops, for example, but all located geographically in different regions. In some location, I want to set up a printer system A, in another one a printer system B, and each printer system needs its own security rules. For this use case, I have to define the printer system rules independently for each firewall. SMC 3.0 improves the user experience thanks to the rule sets. From our previous example, 2 rule sets have been created, one for each printer system, and each rule set has its own security rules and can be applied to any firewall, whatever the folder hierarchy is. So no need to copy-paste the rules, nor to recreate them one by one on each firewall. It is also really easy to duplicate a rule set, which is quite similar to another one, and to apply it from the firewall policy panel. Also, if a rule set needs one or more rule modifications, I only have to modify the rule sets once, and it will be pushed automatically to every firewall using this rule set. So basically, with the rule sets, I save some time and I avoid to do some mistakes.
Okay, so it was a nice demo to better understand how rule sets works on SMC 3.0. So now, as a conclusion, I will go into the customer benefits you can find with this version, major version of SMC 3.0. So the first one, of course, is the first benefit you will find is to become more efficient. So thanks to the network management, as an administrator, you can get more visibility and more flexibility. You have more features integrated into SMC that allow you to centralize all the management of your firewall, and you don't have to go on each firewall. Second benefit is to get a safe configuration. So thanks to the automatic rollback that ensure SMCA administrator that the connection between SNS and SMC will never break if it is not an expected behavior. Also, it is more secured thanks to the local modification warning and the easy restore process. The infrastructure control question section. I will answer to all your questions. Do not hesitate to ask some. Let me go to the question. I can see that there is the first one about the items that are concerned by the local modifications. All the items that are known by SMC can be identified by these local modification features. So basically, the network, the policy rules that are modified. The global policy rules on the firewall, the objects, the certificates, and the VPN. So there's some other question. So yes, there is the second one, how a rule is integrated into the firewall filtering policy. So when you select the firewall that will get the rule set, you will define if you want the rule set to be applied at the first or at the last position of the firewall level. Then once you get into the firewall policy, you will be able to move it at the position you want. You can apply at the middle of the firewall level, or the first or the last one is as you want. Okay. Another question, yes, about the rollback timing. So when can we set the rollback timing? So you are able to set this timing. By default, the rollback will happen when the SNS is not able to reconnect to SMC for 30 seconds. If you know that your throughput is not good, and for good reason, you could be not able to reconnect to SMC after this 30 seconds. You can change this value to any timing you want. And also, you can, if there is a good reason for SNS to be unconnected to SMC after a network deployment, you are also able to disable this option so that there is no more rollback, and the SNS will keep the configuration it just gets, even if it is not connected to SMC anymore. So for the moment, there is no more question that is raised. Maybe the time the next one arrives, let me remind you that the presentation will be available on our YouTube channel if you want to get the replay. Also, all the demonstration video will be available also on our YouTube channel. I think, yes, you have it now on the chat box of GoToWebinar. So you can get all the demonstration of the 3 features if you want to get back to them. So there are no more questions. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. Really sorry again for the starting of this webinar, which was quite difficult for us, and I guess for you too. I hope you got all the information you wanted about this new version. And if you have more questions, do not hesitate to contact us, either your marketing contacts, myself, or your sales contacts that you have usually. Thank you very much, and talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye.